In Yu-Gi-Oh's rich history, there are many archetypes that have existed. However, for a good amount of them, they usually amount to becoming garbage. Now, this isn't necessarily for the fault of the game, but more so the fact that cards have to be designed and certain decks have to exist. With their power levels being higher or lower, it doesn't matter. However, we've had some sets in the last year that people have been really upset about in terms of the power level of certain decks. And in this case, in Soul Burning Volcano, we had some of the sets that had really terrible, arguably people said terrible support. However, I would argue all the decks in that set were actually really good. And one archetype in particular had support that arguably exceeds all the others. Now, it's not Salamangreat, because Salamangreat only really needed the fire, and Salamangreat of Fire turns the deck around, and Blazing Phoenix. And although Volcanics are a fan favorite deck, they weren't necessarily starving in terms of being, playable, but people love the fact that they're playable. I'm talking about the third one, the one that gets left behind when people talk about this set, and that's going to be Battlin Boxers and their broken wave of support. As in today in Budget Buffed, I'm going to talk to you about the 5 cards or the best 5 cards from the set for Battlin Boxer, and why they turn this deck from being a laughing stock and a joke into a broken archetype. Now, let's start with the first card, that being Battlin Boxer Promoter. And its effect reads as follows. If your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. You contribute this card as cost. Special summon up to 2 Battlin Boxer monsters with different names from your deck except Battlin Boxer Promoter. You can banish this card from your graveyard as cost. Increase or decrease the levels of all Battlin Boxer monsters you currently control by 1. You can only use each effect of Battlin Boxer Promoter once per turn. Also, you cannot special summon monsters during the turn you activate any of this card's effects, except Battlin Boxer monsters. Now, inherently, when you hear this, this is an insane card. Being able to special summon itself already makes it good, but even by normal summoning it, you're able to tag it out into 2 Battlin Boxer monsters with their effects active and not negated. Additionally, for this Xyz-based archetype, being able to banish it to increase the level of all the Battlin Boxer monsters by 1 or decrease them by 1 allows you access to all the remaining monsters of the archetype in terms of the rank 5s and the rank 3s. However, archetype blocking you is somewhat difficult, but does keep it from being too broken and busted in other decks, and makes this the first card that gives this deck arguably an insane push forward, as now it has an insane tutor and an insane start, as it promotes the archetype forward. However, let's move into the second card, and the second card is one that I think gets the deck rolling in the right direction, this being Battlin Boxer King Dempsey. Now, Battlin Boxer King Dempsey is an Xyz monster that takes 2 level 4 monsters, which is generic. If this card is special summoned, you can take 1 level 4 or lower Fire Warrior monster or 1 Battlin Boxing spell / trap from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. You can detach 1 material from a monster you control, and if you do, you apply the following effect. Your opponent cannot target Battlin Boxer monsters you control with card effects for the rest of this turn. You can only use each effect of Battlin Boxer King Dempsey once per turn. Now, for an Xyz monster, this is a great way to start your turn. As long as you can turn any 2 of your level 4 monsters into King Dempsey, he's going to grab anything from the archetype and or a generic Fire Warrior if you want to use it. But more importantly, he can also grab 1 of the spells and traps if you so need it at the time. Now, this turns King Dempsey arguably into an insane starter, as if you're just able to go ahead and go to Promoter to go to this. If you need it, you can go ahead and grab what you need. However, its additional effect to target the Battlin Boxer monsters and protect them from targeting effects from your opponent is just absolutely phenomenal by detaching an effect, which also allows him that if your opponent did target it with an imperm to stop the search, you can immediately fire it off, stopping that imperm from being usable because it cannot target Battlin Boxer monsters, as this effect would resolve first, basically giving them another enabler to search, but more importantly a protective option, something that Battlin Boxers didn't really have in the terms of monsters. Now, moving into the third card, this one is more, I'd argue, one of the more lackluster of the cards, but is very important as it gives the archetype something it didn't really have before. This being number C79, Battlin Boxer Nova Kaiser. So being the upgrade to number 79 Battling Boxer Nova Kaiser. You would think that this card would probably be able to go right on top, but it does not. However, it'll be explained in a second as to why. So first, it takes 3 level 5 monsters, something not really achievable, but with other cards as mentioned before, this can be done now. And its effect reads as follows. It gains 200 attack for each material attached to it. Once per turn, when your opponent would special summon a monster or monsters, as a quick effect, you can detach 2 materials from this card. And if you do, you negate the summon, and if you do that, you destroy that monster or monsters. If this card has number 79 Battling Boxer Nova Kaiser's material, it gains this effect. Once per turn, when an attack is declared involving your Battling Boxer monster and an opponent's monster, you can send 1 Battling Boxer monster from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and if you do, you attach that opponent's monster to this card as material. Now, Nova Kaiser, or at least C79, is actually a very good card. However, it does lack a lot in terms of being synergistic with the rest of the support, but for one big reason. It needing to take 3 level 5s means you would have to dedicate 3 of your level 4 monsters, and something not everyone wants to do. More importantly than that, its additional effect to have Battling Boxer Nova Kaiser as material is actually very great and a very powerful card. But if you have no way to effectively get into this card easy, which it doesn't have because it can't just go on top of number 79, which probably would have been better for this archetype, it hurts. But it doesn't mean that this card's absolutely bad. You can actually hard make this card very easy with the new support, and more importantly than that, it being able to steal an opponent's monster with the 79 as material does give this card a bit of utility, as it can simply be an annoying threat to your monster, as when you choose to attack, or when an attack is declared involving the Battling Boxer monster, this card can interrupt and just immediately go into taking one of your opponent's monsters away, making it absolutely phenomenal, as it's an interesting type of removal, at the same time being a negate. So, for an archetype like this, who could hate it? I like the card, and arguably, it's still playable, so it's very good. Now, moving into the 4th card, this is the card that I personally think breaks the archetype open, because it is the best card and the best wave of support that this deck and many decks have been wanting, and this card alone can fix the issues, being Battling Boxer Uppercutter. As it reads, if this card is normal or special summoned, you add 1 Battling Boxer monster or 1 counter trap from your deck to your hand, except Battling Boxer Uppercutter. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can activate one of these effects as cost. Special summon 1 Battling Boxer monster from your graveyard, except Battling Boxer Uppercutter. Then, as another effect you could use, set 1 counter trap from your graveyard to your field. You can only use 1 Battling Boxer Uppercutter effect per turn, and only once that turn. Now, this card had to have that effect because it does arguably everything you need. It can be a starter in the beginning of the game to essentially get you whatever you need that's missing. It can be an extender in the later parts of the game to essentially recycle from the grave. It can make pushes. It comes into the late game. It just does it all. And let me start by explaining how. So first and foremost, Battling Boxer did not really have a rota. Although being warriors and having access to the reinforcements of the army, if you know any great warrior deck, they are starving for any type of way to search from their deck. Whether it be Goki, heroes, or anything of the sort, having any monster that says normal summon or special summon, search any card from the archetype or a monster, just is absolutely phenomenal. But what if I told you could even grab a counter trap? Now, most people would, if you were playing since the last couple of years, and remember during the times of Orcust, things of like Denglong and 9 Pillars, if you told me an archetype could get access to a counter trap and it was arguably a part of the archetype itself, that is absolutely nuts. And I would think you're pulling my leg, but in this case, it's not. As Uppercutters are able to do any of the such. You want to negate and you need a counter trap, it can do that. You want to basically grab a Battling Boxer monster for extension or for another play next turn, go ahead and do that. And if you think you don't need to and you just have it on the field and it gets sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can go ahead and just reborn a monster, or you set one of the counter traps that you already had in your graveyard to your field, effectively giving you another way to use it during the next turn. Like I said, Uppercutter is one of these cards that once you see it and read its effect, you realize this is a part of a broken... This card is not a part of a broken strategy yet, but it has the potential to be, as it has everything it needs right now. So we're just waiting on additional support to push it over the edge. Now we move into the 5th card, and arguably the 5th card is very integral to the strategy because it gives it a negate. But more importantly than that, it facilitates the new strategy of what you're supposed to do with the new cards. This being Battlin Boxer cross counter, or actually Battling Boxing. Point is, let me read this effect. When your opponent activates a monster effect, you can destroy one Battling Boxer or number exceeds monster you control. And if you do that, you negate the activation. And if you do that, you destroy that monster. Then you can apply the following effect. Special summon one Battling Boxer exceeds monster from your extra deck with a different name from the first monster. And if you do, you attach this card to it as material. You can only activate one Battling Boxing cross counter per turn. Now, this card's absolutely busted, and the reason why it's busted is if you read its effect at first, most people would assume that this isn't that good. But this card actually has something insane about it, and this means you can actually break in this deck and still have an interruption that's pretty good. What I mean by this is if you draw cards or get negated out of the wazoo, if you still draw a cross counter can be set and become a disruption. And more importantly than that, cross counter, if it fully resolves by destroying the monster, you are able to float into an Xyz monster from your archetype to get started. This is absolutely insane because now King Dempsey can basically fix your hand and get you set up on the next turn. Now what I mean by this is simple. If you were to have any Battling Boxer monster in cross counter, you could just normal summon it, set the trap, pass your turn, go ahead and let your opponent do stuff, negate them, and then once that's done and it resolves successfully, you're able to float into King Dempsey. King Dempsey will allow you to grab any fire warrior that you need, and you can essentially get set up for next turn. And if so choose, they want to impermanence you or some type of negate in response to it, the next thing you do is just chain King Dempsey, detaching the cross counter as material, and now he can't be targeted. So absolutely insane, absolutely broken. This trap fixes a problem the deck had, is that if it bricked, or if it needed something just generic, it didn't really have too many good counter traps, as most of them facilitate something with battles. But yeah, this arguably is a staple in the deck. I think you could run this at 3 if you really wanted to, because now you could just, get it set up and start playing. But this is where I get into the closing thoughts of the video and explain why this support's actually insane. Now, most people would look at this and kind of say, well, this stuff is good, but the archetype sucks. The archetype actually isn't that bad. As being a part of the Fire Warriors, you have access to some amazing search cards, such as Infernoble Arms Durandal, and using something like Reinforcements of the Army to tutor out cards. However, since Battling Boxer's new wave of support is meant to make them more insular and focus on the Battling Boxers themselves, they did not disappoint. But giving you access to Rescue Rabbit, giving you access to Stratos twice if you want to count King Dempsey as well, giving you arguably 2 negates in the form of Nova Kaiser and the cross counter, and don't even get me started on the fact that King Dempsey has a quick effect target protection. We also can't forget the other card released, 2 of the cards released in the set, being Chief Second, which is an additional normal summon, and basically the 7th Force being somewhat of a rank up magic, but we probably needed our own Battling Boxer rank up magic, to be honest. But the point is, the shell of what you need for a good deck is here in this buff's budget, and the reason why is all these cards are very cheap. Although Soul Burning Volcano isn't a set that people liked, it's actually proving to be one of the better Legendary Duelists, as unlike something like the Duelist from the Deep, the Battling Boxers, Volcanics, and Salamangrates are all archetypes that were already somewhat decently designed in terms of what they are or what type of subtypings they follow. And the reason why is that being a Fire Warrior really helps out Battling Boxers, and the fact that something like Rocket and other different cards had already existed for Volcanics really allows the deck to just kind of build off of it. And Salamangrate, come on. Salamangrate's one of the best decks, I would argue, created in the last 6-7 years, so it didn't need much support. But the reason I want to talk about budget buffed, and specifically Battling Boxers, is because this deck is I would argue looked down upon in the set, as some people think, oh, it doesn't have an FTK like Volcanics, and Salamangrate's already a great deck. So this deck isn't that good. But I hate to tell you guys, it's just waiting for a bit more support, as essentially this deck is now playable. Before, I think it was a very, very, very rogue D-level type of deck, where it wasn't necessarily really, really bad. It couldn't compete because it's not modernized. With these cards, Konami really went out of their way to modernize this strategy and really facilitates it as arguably one of the better supported decks from a Legendary Duelist in a very long time. However, Time will tell, as I do think once the next wave of support helps and comes, if it does focus on as well as assisting the support, I think this deck is on its way to becoming arguably a tier 1 contender. And I'm not saying that as a joke. It has access to everything that old decks would love, being the counter traps, Stratoses, searches, generic ability to just get into good Xyz monsters. And the fact that they're Xyz didn't even get me to the point of what I wanted to say, is that we have access to Zeus and other generic level rank 4 Xyz monsters, Baguska, Abyss Dweller, the works. So this deck is just waiting to find some more support to get it over the hump. And that's why I can definitely say that this deck is buffed and budget. Now that's all I've got for you guys today. If you liked the video, you know what to do. Subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all that jazz. But more importantly, if you enjoy, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Now, this is Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there to sign on.